So today will be a little bit easier. We're going to invite in now our guest for the day. Will join us for the next few segments. Our guest will be around you. He's come next few months, be with you. Some of you have worked directly with our guest in a previous lifetime. Some of you have studied our guest and their teachings and their understandings. So our guest comes in today in a place of honor. Take a deep breath and welcome in Carl Gustav Jung into our gathering. He's been longing to return, to come back and join us up front like this. He is not reincarnated back to earth, but will be soon. Perhaps my new persona, Sam, will perhaps get to know this reincarnation of Jung back here on earth. But he was a leader in his time, developing new ideas and new consciousness. And while there was such a movement back in his days towards science and technology, he said, hang on just a minute. It's not all about science. Matter of fact, the human is deprived of a very important part of themselves if you make it all about facts and figures and only the things that can be seen through a microscope or factored into a mathematical formula. There's something more. There's this thing called the psyche. There's this thing called the spirit. And that should play such an important role in any person's life, regardless of whether they or not they are religious, but the understanding of their consciousness, of their inner self, and the thing that does go beyond the mind. He was a pioneer in his time, and that's why he is asked to come back and see the new pioneers of this new age, to learn from you, so that when he incarnates once again, he has the very valuable lessons from all of you, the insights and the awarenesses that you have helped to develop. Carl came in also at an important time in his lifetime, although not nearly as large as the changes you are seeing right now. Dear Carl, like most good young Swiss boys, had to study hard, had to recite and memorize and hit the books. His father, a preacher, wanted him to be a good student and a successful person in life. But there was always something in Carl that caused him to resent and resist the studies, much more so than other boys his age, 8, 9, 10 years of age. Even though he could discipline himself, even though he studied hard and got somewhat good grades, there was part of him that was beginning to get angry, beginning to resent any of this studying. He wanted to go off in his daydreams. He wanted to feel his intuition. He wanted to connect with his spirit. But you can imagine, as a young boy, how difficult that was to talk about when the order of the day was getting good grades. As the only son and the only child in his family, getting good grades so he could be successful, carry on the family name. But he set up an interesting little situation for himself, as many of you did when you were younger also. I'm going to ask you to allow yourself to remember an event in your life that occurred when you were in the age range of, let's say, 7 to maybe 12 or 13 years of age. Something traumatic happened to change the course, to to open you up. For Carl, it was an argument with some of his other classmates one day. It got a bit nasty, using not so nice words with each other. Carl held back, trying not to get angry, even though he could feel his face getting red and his fist clenching, until one of the other schoolmates, a boy much larger than he, happened to make an inappropriate comment about Carl's mother. Now, some of you know what that's like. But in this case, it was real. For Carl's mother had severe problems with depression, anxiety. She was sent away quite often, locked away on a few occasions. And the separation from his mother was deep in Carl's heart and mind, his caring for her, but also his embarrassment about her. So the moment the other boy made the comment about what you would say now, your mama, has brought up all of the anger, all of the resentment, and all the ill feelings that Carl had been holding, and he lunged at the accuser. And of course, the other boy, being much larger and much stronger and having the assistance of some of his other close-by thugs, beat the crap out of Carl, got him down on the ground, knocked his head continually into the hard dirt until he lay unconscious and lifeless. That was a turning point in Carl's life. Because while he was laying there unconscious, there was an infusion of new energy. You know what happens? Sometimes you're in a car accident. Sometimes you fall, get the wind knocked out of you. Sometimes, like Carl, somebody punches you. As he lay there unconscious, there was a change in him, and he went from everything going through the mind to his heart opening up. When he came to, stumbled back home, he vowed never to go to school again. You see, he placed the blame on school, but something else was in the works. He told his father, his caretakers, that he couldn't possibly go back, for they would beat him up again. But that was an excuse for what would become the very, very formative years of Carl's life. He studied somewhat under his father, but he spent a tremendous amount of time with himself. What some would call daydreaming, but it was expanding. Some would call just lying in bed, but what he called going into other realms. What some would call self-absorbed, but what actually was coming to know himself. He stayed out of the mind and the studying for several years so that he could bring his intuition and a sense of self into the forefront. It was a setup that Carl had for himself, a just-in-case setup. Just in case he got too caught up with studying as he feared he might. Just in case he forgot what he had come to earth to do, to open the doors of consciousness, to be able to talk about things like cosmic consciousness, awareness of other dimensions and spirits. He come here to study psychiatry, philosophy, psychology, but from a whole new standpoint. Neither the hard intellectual study or the religious study, but what you would now call the new consciousness. So his episode when he was 12 years old altered the very mental course that he was on. Oh yes, eventually, one day, he chose again to go back to the studying, and He did it from a whole new place now, not just memorizing, but rather absorbing information. Not doing it just so he could get good grades and go to a good school, but because he was now immersed in the study of human consciousness, human history, and human potentials. Of course, as you know, he went on to become famous, writing books, lecturing around the world, meeting some of the greats, spent some time working with Freud, but at some point in their relationship, basically disagreeing with each other, with Jung going off on his own path, Freud going off on his. Of course, both of you, and Freud and Jung, know how the rest of each of their lives worked out. Dear Shambram, dear Shambram, Carl joins us. CJ, we like to call him, joins us for this special gathering to watch yet the next level of consciousness, evolution of consciousness take place. Of course, he misses dearly what's being done, wishes he could be a part of it, so has chosen to come back in a new physical body quite soon. And some of you he may meet. Some of you he, as a young adult, may study under. Some of your books he may read. Some of your paintings, your inventions he might become familiar with. So it's indeed an honor to have him back, the pioneer of the new consciousness of a time past, coming to visit the pioneers of the new consciousness now. What an honor. Let's take a deep breath.